How's it going, guys? Welcome back. In this video, we're going to be looking at how to answer the headings question. Let's take a look. This is what the headings question looks like, and the way to identify it is, well, says over here, it tells you that you have a list of headings and you have to find the correct matching paragraph for each one of these headings. This question is not in order and it is a challenging question. Let me give you a bit more explanation. So since this question is not in order and it is challenging, this is a question that you would save for the end. And once again, when I say save something for the end, I don't mean save it for the end of your test. What I mean is you should answer the easy questions in a reading passage first, and then return to the difficult questions like the headings question at the end of that reading passage. So for each reading passage, you answer the easy questions first and then you answer the difficult questions. Then you will move on to the next reading passage and again, you're going to repeat the same thing. You will do the easy questions first and then the difficult questions at the end of that reading passage, and then you would move on to the next reading passage and repeat the same thing. So this is a question that you should save for the end of that reading passage. In whichever reading passage it appears, you should save it for the end of that reading passage. And why we do that is so that you have a better understanding of what the passage is about. Because when you answer the easy questions first, you will give yourself the time and the chance to familiarize yourself with the content in each of the paragraphs in the passage. Now, this is a main idea question. This is an important distinction. So before, you might remember when we talked about how to answer the paragraph location question. In the paragraph location question, we were looking for very specific information. Well, in the headings question, we are looking for the overall gist of the entire paragraph. We are looking for the main idea. So with this question, examiners want to know if you understand the main idea of the different paragraphs. Do you understand the overall meaning, also known as gist? Next, be careful of the exact language trap. This is quite common. You will see this in different types of reading questions. And this is a trap that appears in the listening module as well. So be careful of this. Don't just pick an answer because the exact same keywords are used. A lot of times the examiners are going to throw in the exact keywords just to trick you, because they know that if your level of English is not very high, then you are going to fall for that trap. You're going to choose an answer just because you see the same word appear in the reading passage. So don't do that. Always be on the lookout for the synonym language. You have to be able to understand the overall meaning of what is being talked about in the paragraph. Now, with the headings question, we are basically trying to identify the main idea, as you already know by now. And the way that we do that is by reading certain sentences in the paragraph. We don't read the whole paragraph, we only read certain sentences. And within those certain sentences, the most important sentence is the first sentence. It's also called the topic sentence or the controlling sentence because it controls what the paragraph is going to talk about. Or you can look at it as an overview of what the paragraph is going to be about. So that first sentence is very important. I will also go ahead and say that the second sentence is also quite important. The most important is the first sentence. The second most important sentence is the second sentence. And the reason for this is that oftentimes what the examiners will do is they will combine the first sentence and the second sentence into one single question. Remember that in most of these questions, you are going to have an answer that comes from one or two sentences. And oftentimes they will combine two sentences to make a single sentence question. So also be sure to read the second sentence as well. It's very important. Now, each heading can only be used once. So when you get this question, you're not going to have a scenario where you will use the same answer choice twice. So that's not going to happen. Each heading will only be used once, and the example heading will not be used. So there's going to be an example in there that they will put in there in the question set just to show you how the question works. So that example heading is not going to be used. Now let's talk about the basic strategy for this question type. The first thing is we are going to underline or circle the keywords in the answer choices. Okay, so the answer choices are going to be the list of the headings. Those are the answer choices. We're going to mark the keywords in those answer choices and then try to find those keywords and synonym language for those keywords in our paragraphs. Next, what you have to do is you have to go to the shortest paragraph and do that first. So you're going to have a bunch of different paragraphs in your reading passage. Locate the shortest one first. Do that first. And then once you answer the question for the shortest paragraph first, then you would move on to the next shortest paragraph. And then the next shortest, and then the next shortest, and so on. The reason that we do this is because when you answer the shortest paragraphs first, you are going to save yourself a lot of time because these are going to be quite easy to answer. So that's why we do those first. Remember, the goal here is to get as many questions correct as possible. So in order to do that effectively, you have to answer the easy questions first. So start with the shortest paragraphs. All right, now here we're talking about those sentences. Remember, we talked about how the first and the second sentence are the most important ones in the whole paragraph. These two sentences, the first sentence and the second sentence, are going to give you a very good overview of what the whole paragraph is going to talk about. Now, some IELTS teachers are going to tell you to read the first sentence and the last sentence because what happens in traditional paragraphs is that in a traditional paragraph, the first sentence is going to give you the overview of what the paragraph is going to be about, and then the last sentence kind of summarizes that paragraph. It's like a concluding sentence that wraps up everything that this paragraph talks about. Okay, so usually that happens in traditional paragraphs. But here's the thing, in the IELTS exam, these examiners are oftentimes not writing traditional paragraphs. So that means that if you read the last sentence hoping to find some sort of a conclusive sentence, some sort of a conclusion regarding that paragraph, it is very likely that you're not going to find it. Oftentimes you're not going to find it because in the IELTS, they don't really use traditional paragraphs all that often. Sometimes they will, but oftentimes they don't use it. So the last sentence can be helpful sometimes, but most of the times it is not going to be helpful for you. So here is what I suggest. You should first read the first two sentences. Those are the most important sentences. Read those first, and once you have a good understanding of what this paragraph is going to talk about, then try to find the answer. Try to see if that information matches up with any of your answer choices. If you find the answer after reading the first two sentences, great. You've already solved the question and you can move on to the next paragraph. However, if you don't find the answer after reading the first two sentences, then you should move on and read the final sentence. Okay? So usually you will be able to find the answer after just reading the first two sentences, but if you still don't find the answer, then it makes sense to read this last sentence in the paragraph. Now, step number 4 is just to go to the headings, questions, look at the answer choices and just choose the answer choice that captures the same meaning. So you underlined certain keywords in the answer choices, and now you are looking for those keywords and synonym language for those keywords in the shortest paragraph, and you are reading the first two sentences, and maybe the last one if you still don't find the answer. But once you read these sentences and once you have the general gist of what the paragraph is talking about, then you just have to match the paragraph with the correct answer choice. And finally, you just have to repeat that process once again. So you're going to now move on to the next shortest paragraph after answering your question. You're going to move on to the next shortest paragraph, and then you're going to repeat this process until you finish all the questions. Great. So that's our strategy. Now let me show you some examples. So here we have an example in which I'm only going to be answering 2 questions for you over here, number 14 and number 15, just to show you how it works. And then in the following videos, we'll go into more detail when we answer the practice questions. But here I just want to give you a general overview of how to tackle this question. So here we go. The first thing you're going to do is pay attention to how many paragraphs are going to be used. So here it says we're going to be using paragraphs B and from D through F. So this is important so that you don't waste time searching answers in a paragraph in which the answers are not going to be found. Okay, so pay attention to the paragraphs. The next thing you have to pay attention to are the answer choices, which are the list of headings that you have over here in the box. Once again, each one of these answer choices can only be used once. And then over here, they're going to give you a little example of how to answer the question. So they're telling you, for example, the question is asking you which answer choice is the best match for paragraph A. So paragraph A is the question and these are the answer choices. So which is the best match? It tells you in the example that for an example like this, paragraph A, the correct answer is going to be number 4. So since you know that number 4 is an answer choice that is already used for the example, just cross it out. Put a line across it so that you don't confuse yourself, so that you can really narrow down the answer choices that are available to you. So cross out the answer choice that has already been used because you're not going to be using it for any of the real questions that you have here. Finally, you're going to mark the keywords. You're going to mark the keywords in the answer choices. Of course, that is the only place where you have keywords. You don't really have any keywords in the questions. So you're going to be marking the keywords in the answer choices. And the last thing you need to know is that when you start to answer these questions, you may be wondering which question should I start with? Should I start with paragraph C or paragraph D? Well, it's just a matter of finding the shortest paragraph and starting with that. So just see which is the shorter paragraph. Is it C or is it D? So if in this example, I'm assuming that the shortest paragraph is paragraph D. So if paragraph D is the shortest paragraph out of these 2 options, I'm going to start with paragraph D. So let's go ahead and start to answer these questions. I'm going to start off by first answering question number 15, since that has the shortest paragraph. So here is our question number 15, paragraph D, and here is our paragraph D. So here we have the paragraph, and we basically have to find out which answer choice out of these 3 answer choices is going to be the best fit for this paragraph. So remember, what are we going to do? Can you guess? What is the first thing that we're going to do? If you guessed, read the first 2 sentences, then you are correct. So here I've highlighted in this pink color the first 2 sentences. Here we have our first sentence, and then starting from here we have our second sentence. So I'm going to try to find my answer after reading these 2 sentences, and if I still don't find my answer, then I'm going to read this last sentence over here. So let's go ahead and read this now. This book is a narrative history of climatic shifts during the past 10 centuries and some of the ways in which people in Europe adapted to them. Part 1 describes the medieval warm period, roughly 900 to 1200. Great. So those are our 2 sentences. So every time you have to do basically the same thing. Read the first and the second sentence first, and then if you don't find the answer, read the last sentence. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about, what are these 2 sentences talking about? What is the main idea being communicated in these two sentences? Take a moment to think that through. What is the main idea? What is this paragraph going to talk about? This paragraph is going to talk about this portion over here. This is really the summary of our main idea. This is the gist. It's talking about how this book is a narrative history of climatic shifts during the past 10 centuries. That is the controlling idea. That is what this whole paragraph is going to talk about. It's going to give more details regarding this main idea. So that is the main idea, and this is an important skill. You have to be able to identify, based on the first two sentences, you have to be able to identify the main idea of that paragraph. So in this case, this portion underlined in the green color is our main idea. Now take a look over here. It says narrative history. Narrative history. What is that synonym language for? Take a look at the answer choices here. What is this term synonym language for? Can you guess? If you guessed study, then you are correct. This is synonym language for study. A narrative history is talking about the book being a narrative history. Another use of synonym language is over here. Past 10 centuries. What is that synonym language for? Past 10 centuries. That is synonym language for 1,000 years. So since we have located our synonym language here, and the main idea of this paragraph is about this book being a narrative history or a study of climatic shifts during the past 1,000 years. So the correct answer for question number 15 is going to be answer choice number 3. Let us move on to our next question, question number 14. This time we have paragraph C. So we've already eliminated answer choice number 3. We've already used that. So remember, we're not going to be using answer choice number 3 because each answer choice can only be used once. So really, you have to decide between these two. These are the only available answer choices now. So here is our paragraph, and you can see that this paragraph is much longer than the previous paragraph. So that's why we started with the shorter one first. So now we're moving on to the longer paragraph. And once again, what are we going to do? The first thing that we're going to do is read the first two sentences. Let's go ahead and read them. Reconstructing the climate changes of the past is extremely difficult because systematic weather observations began only a few centuries ago in Europe and North America. Records from India and tropical Africa are even more recent. Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a moment to think about what the paragraph is going to talk about based on the information that you have in these two sentences. I want you to identify the main idea. What is the main idea? Go ahead, think it through. So these two sentences are really talking about how reconstructing the climate changes of the past is extremely difficult. So trying to figure out what the climate change used to look like in the past is a difficult thing to do. And that is really the main idea. That is what this whole paragraph is going to expand upon. So that's the gist. That's it right there. So you have to be able to look at the first sentence and the second sentence and maybe the last sentence sometimes, and you have to be able to identify the gist of that paragraph. So usually you're not going to find the gist in the entire sentence. You're not going to find the gist in the entire first and the second sentence. No, it's usually going to be just a small portion in that first two sentences. And you have to be able to identify that. Now let's take a look at the synonym language being used here. So here we have this portion, it says climate changes of the past. What do you think that is synonym language for? Take a look at these two answer choices. What is this synonym language for? Climate changes of the past. Weather records. It is synonym language for weather records. Of course, it can also be another rephrasing of this portion over here, past climatic conditions. That very well could be the case. So we're not sure. It could be that the answer is number 1. Okay? It could be number 1. Because we have our synonym language here, past climatic conditions. But remember, the main idea that we have here is about how reconstructing the climate change of the past is very difficult. That's what we're talking about. So answer choice number 1 is about how past climatic conditions can be determined. It's talking about the method in which the past climatic conditions can be determined. But here, it's not really talking about the method. It's talking about the difficulty related to reconstructing these past climatic conditions. So what this paragraph is talking about is how reconstructing the climate changes of the past is very difficult because all the weather observations that we have are only a few centuries old. Our records, it says, are very recent. They're very recent. So that's what makes it difficult. And so it's basically saying how we need to gather more knowledge. We need to gather more data. Now, at this point, what you can do is, if you are not sure about the answer, what you can do is also you can read the last sentence. So let's go ahead and read it in this case. It says, we are close to a knowledge of annual summer and winter temperature variations over much of the northern hemisphere going back 600 years. So what it's telling us here is that we are very close to a knowledge of the annual summer and winter temperature variations, meaning that we are almost there, but we just need more data, see? So what it's really talking about is how we have a growing need for weather records, because if we can gather more records, then we will have a complete knowledge. Right now, we don't have complete knowledge. We are close, but we don't have complete knowledge because our data is very recent. So that's why we need more data. So the correct answer is going to be number 2. So that's it. I hope that gives you a better understanding of how to go about answering this question type. Now, in the next 2 videos, we're going to be delving much deeper into how to answer the headings question when we go through our practice questions. So that's coming up next.